6 signs of emotional abuse and neglect. This talk is for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional guidance, advice, treatment, or diagnosis. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, substance use or abuse, or suicidal thoughts, dial 988. 988 is available 24/7 nationwide and staffed by trained crisis counselors who are just a text or a call away. Physical abuse is often the type of abuse that is validated as a marker for abuse, but there are other types of abuse that are just as important and which are the warning signs of physical abuse. These are psychological and emotional abuse and can greatly damage a person, sometimes even more so than physical abuse. Number 1, withdrawal. Man, a lot of times when an abuser want to take control of somebody, they start isolating you from your family, from your friends, from the people who gonna tell you, this is not you. This is not how you get down. This is not how you was raised. They will isolate you from people. Withdrawal can manifest in many forms. It can look like avoiding eye contact, showing fear, or hesitancy towards others, or a specific person. It can also take the form of isolation where the person doesn't go out or speak to anybody. Emotionally abused people withdraw to feel safe, and it may also be to try to avoid or become invisible to the abuser in hopes that the abuse will stop. But withdrawal can lead to other serious psychological and physical problems, and if it's done for too long, it might develop into another mental illness or make the one already present worse. 6 signs of emotional abuse and neglect. Number 2, low self-esteem and feelings of worthlessness, which means you don't have any value for yourself. Low self-esteem and worthlessness can be expressed verbally with self-talk and phrases like, I'm not good enough, I don't matter, no one likes me, I'm fat, I'm too skinny, I'm ugly. To identify that low self-esteem and feelings of worthlessness is a problem, the person has to be constantly saying these things, so over and over and over again. Another way this can manifest is if a refusal to participate in things that they used to enjoy, or not participate in routines they used to do every night or every morning, like a person who used to go walking and they stopped doing that. Person who used to work out had a workout routine, they stopped doing that. So that can be a sign of a person dealing with some emotional abuse and neglect. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, man, these people who we love and respect could be going through some stuff and we would never know it because they'll never tell us. 6 signs of emotional abuse and neglect. Number 3, changes in appetite or weight. Some abusers take control to the point where they start keeping tabs on what the other person eats. Then they try to convince the other person to change their diet. In most cases, these changes in diet are not healthy and keep the victim in a weakened state. The abused person may keep this mentality even after the relationship ends. So even after the relationship, they still have these unhealthy habits that the other person has programmed them with because they are still convinced that this is the right thing to do, and they'll become fat and ugly if they don't continue with it, or that something bad will happen if they don't. Emotional abuse is one of the most difficult types of abuse to identify and may be subtle and sneaky, but can be extremely toxic for your mental health and well-being. 6 signs of emotional abuse and neglect. Number 4, frequent crying or angry outbursts. Frequent crying or having bursts of anger and irritability are regarded as signs of distress, and due to the abuse, the victim becomes anxious and hypersensitive to people. They overthink everything to try to minimize whatever conflict they think might come, and when the anxiety, the fear, or the trigger becomes too much, they may cry uncontrollably. Crying can also be in response to flashbacks or thinking about being punished or abused again for making more mistakes. And if it can also be expressed as anger instead of sadness, an angry outburst that may or may not make any sense. Anybody had dealt with that? Angry outbursts, triggers. Do you know what your trigger is? Do you know what it sets you off? And it's like you got to be careful when you know what your triggers are, because you don't want to end up going off on somebody. And at the same time, you don't want to let somebody end up manipulating you through that. So you got to know your triggers. You got to know what sets you off, because then you can address it and you can prepare for it. When it happens, you know what it is. This is all those suppressed emotions. So when the person is having these outbursts, when they're going off, or the other side, the flip side, when they're crying all the time, this is all those suppressed emotions and feelings of violation developed throughout the relationship coming out because they finally feel safe enough to let it all out. 6 signs of emotional abuse and neglect. Number 5, blaming themselves for things. It's your fault. But see, you don't have another person doing it to you. You're doing it to yourself. Victims of emotional abuse, it's normal for them to apologize to inanimate objects like a chair or a sofa after they accidentally bump into it. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that something? Yeah, you've been abused so much, you blame yourself. You bump into the couch. You told the couch, sorry. The abuser often tries to shift all blame and guilt onto the victim, making them believe that it was their fault that things went wrong after some time of repeating this and supposed reinforcement of abuse events. The victim comes to believe this, so they automatically apologizes and blames themselves even when it wasn't their fault. Now, this is the last one, 6 signs of emotional abuse and neglect, that kind of threw me for a loop. Fears law enforcement officers. Did y'all know that was a sign of emotional abuse? A person who fears law enforcement officers? Yeah.
I ain't gonna lie.
I mean,
Your cops coming there, pulling your
right.
mom or your dad
Yep.
away.
Mhm.
I can see that.
just imagine if you was living in a crack house back in the 80s. And you was 9 years old or 6 years old, and you remember police ramming and busting down the door and storming through the house and freeze, and guns out and lights on the end of the guns, laying everybody down. Your mama, your mama boyfriend, putting people. I mean, that right there can have an effect on you.
Because when I was 15, I was coming from the wreck. I was going home, and some dude robbed somebody, and I was dressed just like him.
Mm-hmm.
And I came around the corner of the car, and they pulled their guns out.
That's emotional abuse.
And
They didn't physically abuse you,
Yeah.
but the fact that it wasn't you, and maybe they thought it was. Maybe you could have looked like that person, so maybe it wasn't necessarily their fault. Maybe you did look like that person. I mean, stuff like that happens. But that doesn't change the fact that these dudes got a gun on me and I don't did nothing. They might shoot me right now. So abuser might make their girl think like, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't fool with the police. Don't be putting the police in our business. Because if you call the police, something bad going to happen. And I'm telling you right now, we're going to have court right in the street. So don't call the police because we're going to have a shootout. Something going to happen. And I'm telling you right now, the police end up killing me. My sister going to come get you. Putting a fear in her brain not to call the police. You ain't beating her up, but you emotionally abusing her because you probably abusing her physically, and the only thing she can do is probably call the police. And you making her think that if she end up calling the police, the abuse gonna get worse, or once I get out, I'm gonna find you. Trying to make her feel bad. You don't want her calling the police. And it's a well-known fact that not everyone likes the police for different reasons. Still, there is something to be said when it comes to extreme fear towards them. It could be possible that this person had a bad experience with the police that left them traumatized. That's trauma, man. Yeah, that's trauma, man. Right? So, 6 signs of emotional abuse and neglect, man. Number 1, withdrawal. You see a person withdrawing for whatever reason, you might want to talk to them. 6 signs of emotional abuse. Number 2, low self-esteem and feelings of worthlessness. Number 3, changes in appetite or weight. Number 4, frequent crying or angry outbursts. Number 5, blaming themselves for things. And number 6, fears law enforcement officers.